Sydafrika. Vad producerar man för vin inom landet? Bör Sydafrika verkligen kallas nya världen? Och hur ser den gastronomiska kulturen ut? Jag heter Daniela Lund Egernäs och är sommelier. Detta är några saker jag hoppas kunna besvara i den här serien om Sydafrika som vinland. Jag har också tagit hjälp av vår svenska master of wine Madeleine Stenwreth. Det hon inte kan svara på när det kommer till sydafrikanskt vin, det är knappast värt att veta. Tillsammans besöker vi några producenter för att lyfta blicken mot ett land som vi båda älskar. Häng på! Vi har tagit oss till Stellenbosch för ett besök hos Mulderbosch där vinprovning men också vedugnsbakad pizza står på agendan, helt enligt producentens avslappnade manér. Mulderbosch skapade sig på kort tid ett rykte som en av Sydafrikas förnämsta vinproducenter och vinbibeln Platters har korat deras Sauvignon Blanc till Sydafrikas mest hyllade Sauvignon. Idag leder sydafrikanske toppvinmakaren Henry Kotzé produktionen där innovation alltid är i fokus.
So Henry, you're the chief winemaker here at Mulderbosch. Can you just give us a short history about the winery?
Sure. Okay, so Mulderbosch was started in 1989. The founder then, Larry Jacobs, he termed it Mulder because his business partner has her name of Mulder and then Stellenbosch, and he put those two together, Mulderbosch. And it was originally on a farm on the Bottleray Road or close to the Bottleray Road. And then in 2011, we switched farms with the new owners buying the Mulderbosch and the brand. We came to the old Goed, which is an old spier farm, one of the best spier farms that they had. Goed is an amazing piece of soil. That's why the new owners were wanting the vineyards on this site. So we switched premises basically. And so from 2012, it was under American ownership. And then just fast forward a few years, from 2018 under new American ownership. So there was a bit of a changing of hands.
Okay.
And the new owners are now, the board is consisting of 5 Americans and 1 South African. The South African is Kriantu Oosthuis, and he's our CEO, and he is the guy who runs the show on the farm. I just make the wine.
Together with you, of
Yeah,
course.
we hope so.
Yeah.
So the farm consists of about 43 hectares of vineyard, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, a little bit of Petit Verdot, and then Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc. Obviously, we also have some of that. Some beautiful vineyards, very unique soils. The farm is in total about 75 hectares, but only the 43 planted under vineyards. So we start with a sparkling Chenin Blanc. It's a 2020 vintage.
Chenin for me always gives you that little bit of a beeswaxy honeyed note, and it also has a beautiful fruit in terms of like thinking pear and maybe even a touch of pineapple if it's in a ripe style. This one has both of those, and it also has the texture. So it's a very friendly and a very, I would say, a wine that gives you a lot of flavor and a lot of concentration.
The key points for a Chenin Blanc is the higher acidity, the more focus on the freshness, the fruit that comes to the fore, especially like your description of the honeysuckle and the honeycomb that comes through. And that for me is very pertinent in this wine, but also the bubbles, it's not made in that expensive style. So it's not a bottled fermented style. This is an impregnated CO2 bottle of wine.
Yep.
The primary reason for it is to have fun and to have fun in a glass. And that,
so the
I think,
bubbles
adds to
haven't
it.
taken that long to actually be created in the bottle, and
Not at all.
therefore you can be very competitive on the price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the base wine, you put it on an inert line, and we've got a very specific line that we use the bottling of this product for, and it incorporates a very specific amount of CO2 gas in the base wine.
Yeah.
Put a cork in it. It's very easy It's the easiest way to do it, but it's also, you can make a wine and add that little bit of sparkle to it, and it just freshens everything up.
Yeah.
It just livens it up.
This wine doesn't have that incredibly artificial synthetic bomb of candy. It's more like a fruity white wine with bubbles. Is this what you think that is a strength of Chenin as a bubbly wine?
I think you've really just hit the nail on the head, Madeleine. It definitely is a great cultivar to use for the style of bubbles that we want to produce. It's not artificial in any sense. I think it does have a touch of that traditionalism. It does have a little bit of that biscuity. That's Chenin Blanc has that as a normal still wine as well. South Africa is seen as such a fusion wine industry. We've got the new world, we've got some of the old world. I think this product is no different. There's a little bit of that traditional lees contact and brioche that you get, but also the fun-filled, fresh fruit and vibrancy of the wine. And it does make it unique, and it does make it, a product that you probably don't see so much in South Africa of, because we're probably one of the first that produced it in this style. But what are we not as to be innovators in South Africa? We need to keep on going forward.
So Sten, when you read Sten op Hout, I remember, like, if it's 25, 30 years ago, visiting Mulderbosch the first time and tasting Sten op Hout, I had to ask the winemaker at that time, what does that actually mean? And then he explained that Sten is the synonym for Chenin Blanc and Hout means oak.
Yes.
So it was Chenin fermented in oak.
Yep. That's correct.
So that was very unique. And also I remember that label, that striped label, that looks almost like a cigar, like a
cigar box seal.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at Chenin and you look at the oak and the Sten op Hout, what do you think brings out the best in Chenin when you use oak in the wine? What happens, do you think, that makes that an attractive wine?
Well, number one, I think that it's all about the fruit. The most important factor is not to over oak and not to have dominant flavors of toffee, caramel, mocha, coffee, even the normal flavors that come from a barrel or new barrel. So very important is to keep the grape varieties flavor as pure as possible. And that means to use oak that's a little bit older. I call it neutral barrels, maybe bigger formats. We've got some Foudres, which are 1,500 liters, which we use a lot of for the Sten op Hout, as well as our single vineyard. And those impart maturation that brings everything together. And especially the fruit flavors and those different other flavors that come from the maturation, that needs to just harmonize.
Together,
And so in terms of oaking, we were, if not the first, one of the first that actually experimented with putting Chenin Blanc in oak. This is Block W. It's from the 2019 vintage. So Rustenhof is one of the growers that we've been working on for quite a number of years. And this is actually, it's going to be classified as an old heritage vineyard pretty soon. It's
so you're going to have one of those stripes on the label,
it's
saying
35 or 36 years old
which year it was planted.
Yeah,
that's a great concept.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It just cements our heritage.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so when you put your nose into a wine like this and you expect a wine from a single vineyard site, you expect a wine that hits your face, like very intense. But this one, it actually is quite subdued and understated. And I really must say that has become a bit of a signum for the highest quality Chenins in the country, that the winemakers are taking a step back and allowing more graceful fruit to come through, and not about power and concentration, but concentration, but more in in layers underneath. And this one gives me a little bit of like hay and a bit of straw and a touch of I also get a lot of lees contact, and that's what we talked about with a bubbly, like from like bread and biscuits.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Exactly that.
It's not a fruit bomb, it's not jumping at you,
No.
it's saying, I've got a lot of quality to tell you about, but you have to listen and you have to, give me time.
In a certain way, quite teasing as well.
It
Because
is,
it teases with those sweeter flavors,
Yeah.
but then it gives you so much more on the palate. It invites you in. Something interesting about this site, it is not a site that is so forthcoming in terms of fruit. It's from the farm Ristenhof, and it's in the Helderberg area. So if you know the area, it's about not even 4 kilometers from the Atlantic Ocean, and that basin is so full of quartzite and silica.
Yeah.
It's a very well drained soil, and it gives you a certain sense of minerality, huge acidity. So you really have to tone it down. That's where the oaking also just comes in, because it coats the palate. Little bit of Fuja that we have it on. It's about 6 months that we keep it in Fuja, and then it coats that acidity nicely, but it just lingers and it pulls the core of the fruit to the front of the palate the whole time. Gives it the illusion of sweetness, but it's not actually quite there, because it's quite an acidic wine, but it's so well balanced.
Yeah, and it has delicacy. It's like it has lightness, and that what I said, graceful. It feels very elegant. So
Yeah.
it's expressed in humbleness.
Yeah.
So I know that here in South Africa you have like huge problems with like load shedding and things like that. Like, what have you done to go through something like load shedding?
Load shedding, it's a bit of a headache for us on the rural areas, because we are very dependent on electricity. The first was in 2008, so it's been going on for quite a while. It's made us a little bit less dependent on the power supplier, because the only reason, or the only way that you can sort of circumnavigate load shedding is to, in areas or in the times when the load shedding is active, you sort of generate your own power. So a lot of farms these days have got backup generators. That's how it started years back. The first thing you do is to get a backup generator for the 2 to 4 hours that you're off, so that you can just keep on going with your work. We've recently installed quite a few banks of solar power, solar panels, and that can keep us going through the whole day. We generate enough so that we are not as dependent on Eskom. We've also got a backup generator to keep the solar panels going. So there's a big move, I think, not only us, but everywhere in South Africa, farms trying to be more environmentally friendly, more conscious of what's happening in the world these days, trying to be more green with their energy consumption, and I think it's a brilliant move. And load shedding at the start was a nightmare, but now it's sort of a blessing, because you know that you can actually go without and produce your own.
So now we're sitting here with 2 rosés, which is all made from, is it same wine from the beginning?
It's the same wine from the beginning, 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. And
just the bubbles different?
The bubbles we put in.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll pour you.
Thank you
and then
so
you
much.
can pour me.
There you go.
See if we can.
And this is the still.
Yay.
So in all senses of manufacturing, these 2 wines, both the still and the base wine for the bubbles, are the same. Manufactured in the same way. It's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon that we just destem and crush, put in the press, and literally the only skin contact that it sees is in the press while waiting to press. The press cycle that I use is about 2.5 hours, and it takes about a half an hour to fill. So it's about 3 hours of skin contact time, and into a settling tanks and fermentation. So the rest of the way is made like a white wine. And I think that really adds to the allure of it, because Cabernet Sauvignon is a great cultivar to work with for rosé, because it's got all sorts of different profiles. It's got that, depending on when you pick it, and we do pick it in completely different arrays of of tastes and
Yeah,
smells.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got the lighter style, which give you a little bit more spice and sometimes a bit more herbaceousness, and then a little bit later you get the fruit
Yeah.
and the berries and the sweetness, and put together it makes for a very, very nice, drinkable, fun style of rosé, made from Cabernet Sauvignon, which
Yeah.
is a luxurious grape variety. It's more expensive to buy, but we feel that it produces a style that is just unique. We were one of the first to produce rosé from 100% Cabernet Sauvignon,
Yeah.
and it works. It's vegan friendly, so anybody can enjoy a bottle or a glass of it. It's a really fun wine.
Yeah.
So this is the fig, blue cheese, and pancetta pizza.
Okay.
We pair the pizza specifically with the different wines, and this blue cheese and fig pairing is especially nice with the rosé because the sweetness of the fig, it complements the saltiness almost of the blue cheese, and that brings out all the sweetness and sort of the savouriness of the Cabernet Sauvignon, the red berries, blackberries, and it pairs immensely.
So this is like what you do it here. You just nice, chill, like family
Oh, yeah.
pizza style.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a lovely pairing.
You've got the sun, you've got the little springbok in the fields, you want to sit outside, you
Yeah.
want to play with your kids, you order a pizza, and the parents have a bottle of wine to share. It's brilliant.
I must say this is a lovely, super lekker combination. Cheers.
Cheers. 2019 Faithful Hound. It sports a new label, so that's also quite fun.
Yeah.
Which changed up the labels in the past quite considerably. The previous label was just a strip. Now we brought back the dog,
The dog needs to be on the
the
label.
little hound, exactly.
Yep.
And as per normal, it's a Bordeaux blend, and 90% of the grapes come from the farm. So you're sitting in the middle of Faithful Hound country.
Right.
The Cabernet we buy in from 2 different growers. We've also got some parcels of Cabernet on the farm. We've just planted 4 hectares of our own. So in the future we would love to have this as a sort of an estate wine. This is a predominant Cabernet blend. It's 29% Cabernet Franc, 25 Cabernet Sauvignon, 22 Merlot, and then 12 Petit Verdot Malbec.
From the beginning, because I remember this label from like 30 years ago, and it was always a lot of Cabernet Franc in the blend,
Yeah.
which is quite different.
Yes.
And at that time, it was very different. So it was a unique selling point being a Cabernet Franc-led blend.
Yeah.
But you still maintain that through the years.
I think it's important to maintain it because it's at Polkadra, where we're at, is, as it turns out, Cabernet Franc country.
Yeah.
There's so many different producers that specialize in Cabernet Franc because
Yeah.
the soils are just suited for it. The climate is just right for it. Cabernet Franc does really well here.
Yeah.
And in introducing it something as early as we did in the Faithful Hound, I think just underpinned the whole quality aspect of Cabernet Franc and what
Yeah.
it can do in a blend. Paired with a little Cabernet Sauvignon and with the Merlot and little bits of Petit and Malbec, it just adds that little bit of salt and pepper to a blend that's already quite good.
If you look at this wine, what is for you the Faithful Hound? What do you want to communicate with this wine?
For me, it's a bit of a art. You don't want every cultivar to do its own little bit of speaking. You want it to be a choir that everybody has got its little part, but as a whole, you want it to be harmonious and in sync and beautiful. But saying that, it's not just about throwing everything together. Every single parcel has got its own little unique thing that it brings to the party. That's, for me, a perfect hound. Very faithful.
Very faithful.
So the biltong is a hit because it's a South African product, and we love it. It's a cured red meat. It's usually the fillet of the beef that we cure with salt mainly. Just slice it thinly. It's not as wet as a carpaccio. It's completely dry, and especially if it's got a little bit of the fat on the outside, it is just wonderful. It's my staple in the harvest. It gives me the energy I need to go on.
Biltong, I think we would call it entrecote, and it's amazingly flavorful, dried, and it creates like a need. Once you've learned to enjoy biltong, it's like you can't live without it.
Jag tar mig till avlägsna Greyton för att träffa Samantha O'Keefe, kvinnan bakom Lismore. Madeleine och jag, vi avslutar med ett besök hos Glenelg.